Why does he ignore you, yet you can't stop thinking about him? Why does every little sign of attention from him feel like a victory, even when you know he barely cares? You try to convince yourself it's just chemistry, or timing, or some karmic connection. But deep down, it's something darker, something harder to admit. You're drawn to the silence, to the absence, to the man who treats you like a fleeting shadow instead of a real person. And the more distant he becomes, the more you crave his validation. You weren't always like this. You were strong. You were whole. But then he came along, with that calm indifference, that cold smile, that maddening detachment, and it felt like your soul got rewired. You tell yourself you're not addicted, that you could walk away anytime. But if you're being honest, you've tried. And every time you do, something inside you panics, like you're about to lose a piece of yourself you never truly owned. That panic isn't love. It's not even attachment. It's a wound. One that was already there long before he showed up. Because this isn't about him. It's about you. And that's the most terrifying part. You see, the reason why some women become emotionally hooked on men who act like they're nothing lies in a very old, very deep psychological pattern, one that often begins in childhood and plays out silently, invisibly, through every glance, every silence, every mixed signal. When you grow up constantly needing to earn affection, when love is conditional, when approval is inconsistent, your nervous system learns a strange lesson, that love must be chased, that attention must be earned, that you must prove yourself worthy. Not once. Not twice. But constantly. And so, when you meet someone who gives just enough to keep you around, but never enough to make you feel safe, it feels familiar. It feels like home. He doesn't reply for 2 days. Your heart sinks. Then he sends a one-line message, and your brain floods with dopamine. You don't see the game because it doesn't feel like a game. It feels like truth. It feels like you're fighting for something real. But you're not. You're fighting to be seen by someone who is never really looking. This kind of man knows, whether consciously or not, that distance creates desire. Not love. Not respect. Just desire. And in a world where we confuse desire for meaning, that's often enough. But let's be honest, what you're craving isn't him. It's the version of you that feels validated when he finally turns around. The moment you can breathe again, not because you're whole, but because his attention gave you permission to exist. That's not power. That's captivity. And the worst part is, he doesn't even need to be special. He just needs to withhold. To delay. To fragment his attention so that you're constantly trying to collect the scattered pieces of it. Each time he gives you a crumb, your brain interprets it as a feast, because the starvation in between has made you forget what wholeness tastes like. There's a name for this: intermittent reinforcement. It's the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. You never know when the reward is coming, so your system stays on high alert, chasing, waiting, guessing. The unpredictability creates obsession. The inconsistency feels like intensity. And that's why you stay. Not because he's extraordinary, but because his indifference keeps your nervous system hooked on the hope of change. You keep telling yourself he's just misunderstood. That he's broken. That if you love him harder, if you show him patience, he'll finally see your worth. But the truth is, he already sees what he needs: someone willing to shrink, to beg, to bend, so that he never has to. You become addicted to earning love, because somewhere deep inside, you were taught that love isn't something you receive, it's something you have to deserve. But love isn't supposed to feel like negotiation. It isn't supposed to make you anxious, or hollow, or small. Real love doesn't hide behind silence. It doesn't manipulate your worth by showing up only when it's convenient. Still, I know what you're thinking. If I walk away, what if he changes? What if he finally becomes the man I believed he could be? But here's the brutal truth. You're not addicted to him changing. You're addicted to hoping he will. Because that hope gives you a purpose. It gives your pain a story. And stories are easier to cling to than silence. But this story is costing you your peace. It's costing you your dignity. It's costing you you. And deep down, you already know that. You see, the more he withholds, the more you try to compensate. You become the emotional worker in the relationship, doing all the repair, all the forgiving, all the reaching. While he just exists. Aloof. Distant. Unbothered. And that's the imbalance. Not just of affection, but of power. Because the moment someone has the power to define your worth by how they treat you, is the moment you give them the blueprint to break you. But it doesn't have to stay that way. Because once you recognize the pattern, you can interrupt it. You can stop chasing validation from someone who uses detachment as a weapon. You can begin to ask yourself, what part of me believes I need to suffer to be loved? And when that answer surfaces, not with shame, but with clarity, the cycle begins to unravel. But recognizing the pattern doesn't immediately kill the craving. You'll still check your phone. You'll still feel that flicker of hope when his name lights up the screen. You'll still hear your own voice whisper, maybe this time will be different. That's the shadow you have to walk through, not around. Because this isn't just a love story gone wrong. It's a psychological loop, and you've lived in it so long, it started to feel like home. So how do you break something that's wired into your nervous system? How do you stop being pulled toward the one who gives you less, when your whole body reacts like he's giving you everything? You start by noticing the withdrawal. Not numbing it. Not escaping it. Not replacing it with another half-available man in a different body. But sitting in it. You feel the ache, the physical tightness in your chest, the knot in your stomach, the way your thoughts spiral into what-ifs and fantasies. And instead of trying to fix it by reaching for him, you let yourself breathe. Not the man, but the story. The fantasy you wrote in your mind, where he finally wakes up, sees you fully, and begs you to stay. You grieve that dream because it's keeping you trapped. And once you release it, you make space for something far more powerful, self-respect. That word gets thrown around a lot, self-respect. But in moments like this, it isn't about pride. It isn't about acting unbothered. It's about choosing yourself even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. It's about understanding that someone who sees your presence as optional should never hold a permanent place in your heart. And even more than that, it's realizing that love doesn't mean sacrificing your sanity for someone else's attention. But let's go deeper. Why does his distance feel like a challenge? Why do you feel the need to win him? Because somewhere along the way, love became a proving ground. It stopped being about connection and started being about survival. About earning. About proving that you're enough to make someone stay. And he, with his cold demeanor and unpredictable warmth, fits that script perfectly. His inconsistency activates your wounds. And without knowing it, you begin to chase not the man, but the resolution to a lifelong pain. If I can make him choose me, then maybe I was worthy all along. That's why walking away feels like death. Because it's not just him you're losing, it's the illusion of healing through his approval. But here's what nobody tells you, you don't need his approval to be whole. You never did. What you need is to stop looking for love in the same place as your pain was born. You need to recognize that being treated like an afterthought is not romantic. That mixed signals aren't mystery, they're manipulation. That someone who genuinely cares about you will never leave you guessing about your own value. I know, part of you still thinks this is too harsh. You still believe in his good side, those rare, fleeting moments when he looked at you like you mattered. But let me ask you this. How much of your heart have you spent waiting for a glimpse of his? Because a connection that only exists in fragments will leave your soul starving. You'll build castles out of crumbs, imagining a future based on a version of him that only appears when it's convenient. That isn't love. That's hope weaponized against you. And still, when I say, walk away, I don't mean run. I don't mean block, ghost, or pretend you don't care. I mean stand. Still. Grounded. Not because you're punishing him, but because you're done punishing yourself. You start to notice your patterns. You write about them. You sit with them. You feel the tremble in your chest without shaming it. And then, slowly, you begin to reclaim your energy. Because that man, the one who acts like you're nothing, isn't worth your breakdowns. He isn't worth your overthinking. He isn't worth the way you shrink yourself to fit into the tiny spaces he offers. You weren't born to beg. You weren't born to chase. You were born to be whole, full, radiant. And the moment you stop trying to convince someone to love you, is the moment you begin to love yourself in a way that no one can take away. I know it sounds poetic. I know real life is messy. You'll slip. You'll miss him. You'll romanticize the wrong parts. But even in those moments, you'll be different, because now you see it. You see the pattern. You see the wound. You see the game. And most importantly, you see you. And once you truly see yourself, you'll never settle for being invisible again. You'll begin to crave peace over passion, clarity over confusion, and presence over potential. You'll stop waiting for someone to make you feel chosen, because you'll have already chosen yourself. That's where the healing begins. Not when he comes back. Not when he finally apologizes. But when you no longer need him to. And if one day he does reach out, casually, like nothing happened, you'll feel something strange. Not pain. Not anger. Just clarity. And maybe a little sadness. Not for what was lost, but for how long you let yourself believe he was worth the pieces you gave away. That sadness is sacred, because it means the illusion is gone, and in its place is you. But clarity doesn't mean you stop feeling. In fact, you'll feel more than ever. Not because you miss him, but because for the first time, you're fully awake. The numbness fades, and in its place comes a kind of raw honesty that's hard to describe. It's like walking barefoot for the first time after years of wearing shoes 2 sizes too small. It stings a little. But it's also the most real you've felt in ages. You begin to notice how much space he used to take up. Not just in your days, but in your thoughts, your plans, your moods. You see how your self-worth rose and fell with his texts. How your joy depended on his attention. How your silence wasn't peace, but punishment, self-imposed, just to keep him around. And now, without him, everything feels quieter. At first, that quiet will feel like emptiness. Like a void you need to fill. But stay with it. Because if you listen long enough, that silence becomes sacred. Not a void, but a clearing. And in that clearing, something beautiful begins to grow. Not overnight. Not loudly. But steadily. You start saying no to things that used to hook you. You stop checking your phone every hour. You stop twisting yourself into knots trying to be enough. Instead, you become curious. About your own desires. Your own needs. Your own rhythm. You realize that the most dangerous kind of man isn't the one who cheats or lies, but the one who subtly convinces you that love must always hurt. That your longing is the price of his affection. That your softness is a weapon you turn against yourself. And once you see that, you'll never unsee it. You'll walk differently. You'll speak differently. You'll feel differently. Because now you're no longer trying to earn love, you're learning how to receive it. That shift changes everything. Because once you stop romanticizing pain, you stop attracting people who deliver it in beautiful packaging. You no longer chase men who act like they're nothing, because you finally remember you are everything. It doesn't mean you become hard. It doesn't mean you don't love again. It just means you love differently. More consciously. More honestly. With your eyes wide open, not wide shut. You'll still get tested. There will still be moments when someone walks in with the same intoxicating blend of mystery and distance. But this time, something inside you will pause. You'll feel the familiar ache, but you won't feed it. You'll see the red flags, and instead of painting them white, you'll honor them. Not because you're bitter, but because you're awake. You've broken the spell. And that's what this whole journey was always about. Not getting him to love you, but getting you to love you. Because let's be honest, you were never addicted to him. You were addicted to the story you created around him. To the version of yourself you hoped he could complete. To the illusion that if you just proved your worth loud enough, he'd finally hear you. But worth doesn't need to shout. It simply is. And now, so are you. You'll look back one day and realize that the man who acted like you were nothing gave you the greatest gift of all, the mirror. The chance to finally see yourself. Not through his eyes. Not through his moods. But through your own. And when that moment comes, when you no longer crave his chaos, you'll realize something deeper than any quote or therapist could have told you. You were never too much. He was simply never enough. Not enough to hold you. Not enough to grow with you. Not enough to meet the depth you offered so freely. And that's okay. Not everyone is meant to walk beside you. Some people are just detours, necessary ones, to bring you back to your own path. So now, when you see another woman circling the same kind of man, you won't judge her. You'll understand her. You'll remember what it felt like to confuse neglect with passion, inconsistency with excitement. But you'll also know she doesn't have to stay there. That she, too, can choose herself. That healing is possible, not in spite of the heartbreak, but through it. And maybe, just maybe, you'll become the voice you once needed. The reminder that she is not broken. That her longing is not shameful. That her depth is not a burden. Because the truth is, women don't get addicted to men who act like they're nothing because they're weak. They get addicted because they're wired to seek love where they once lost it. They're drawn to the familiar pain, hoping for a different ending. But now, you write your own ending. Not the fairy tale, but something better. A life where your peace isn't sacrificed for passion. Where your silence isn't misread as compliance. Where your heart is full, not from chasing someone else, but from finally coming home to yourself. So no, you're not broken. You're rebuilding. And the woman who rises from this, she won't settle for crumbs. She'll feast on truth. On self-knowledge. On love that doesn't require her to shrink. She'll walk into rooms knowing her worth, and not because someone else handed it to her, but because she remembered it. And once a woman remembers who she is, no man who acts like she's nothing can ever touch her again.